any further apologies?
Jane Neal.
And Councillor Neal. Thank you very much. So, is someone prepared to move that those apologies be accepted?
I will.
Sorry, I missed that. Biddy?
I will.
Yep, move Biddy. Second Joe Parsons. All those in favour? Aye. Those against? Resolution's carried. For those of you who are first time attending today, we have an interest register that's here and gets circulated physically as well as electronically, where we declare as members of this committee any interest, pecuniary or otherwise, or actual perceived or potential conflicts of interest that may arise as a result of your appointment to this subcommittee. So if this will circulate throughout the meeting, and if there are any changes that you make, please alert me into those so they can be updated, and we can do that for you. Any urgent items that haven't been advertised on the agenda that staff or committee members would like to discuss today? Being no urgent items on the agenda, we'll keep moving. The fourth agenda item is the minutes of the previous subcommittee meeting. They've been circulated electronically to committee members via email, and this process is about ensuring they are accurate and true in terms of their record of the meeting that was held on the 9th of July. Kia ora, Rob, welcome. Meeting held on the 9th of July 2020. First question is, have there been any corrections or points of accuracy noted to the secretary? No. Any to be noted now? Someone prepared to move that they are true and correct record of the meeting that was held, someone that was present on the 9th of July. Rob Daniels, seconded Joe Parsons. All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Resolution's carried. Thank you very much. We're now moving into our reports, and the first is the action list, and that's going to be presented to us by Fiona Scadden, the Planning and Customer Services Manager. Kia ora, welcome Fiona.
Okay, so first up we have the Racecourse Master Plan. This is a document that's being put together with different options that the racecourse area could potentially be used for. To be aware that the racecourse was sold to Western District Council for the use of the community, and we are now wanting to, I guess, put together what the concepts are, find out from the community what is wanted up there so that we can move forward with putting some concepts together to go into the long-term plan early next year. So that there was raised and workshopped at the Planning and Regulatory Committee meeting recently, but it is a very early stage document that's a discussion piece for the community, and so from there we'll be looking at full consultation that will lead to submissions and hearing, etc. There's the town centre plan. This has been transferred to the Regulatory and Planning Committee, and that there was discussed again at the 10th of September workshop. This is still quite an unpolished document and needs some concepts put in place to make it really clear to the public what we're potentially looking at, and that's bringing together a culmination of previous consultation that's happened, including previous design plans and traffic counts and design that has happened, putting those together in a concept to have a starting point to get some really good conversation around what people do and don't like in terms of town centre. The beachfront and Sunset Point upgrade.
So
would you like to speak to that?
yeah, I can through the chair.
Good afternoon, Louis.
Afternoon.
For those of you who don't know, Louis Sparks is the Group Manager District Assets at Western District Council.
Right, so the planting plan, as was requested to be circulated, didn't actually happen. The plants are already in, so the work's completed. And I asked that Simon here, who will present a report, but later on Sunset Point, and will elaborate on that.
And then we have the master management plans. This is with regard to each of the reserves that we manage. And again, I'll defer to Lloyd to speak to that.
Thank you, Chair. The reserves, basically we've done a full review of all our reserve properties now. And there's a piece of work to be completed, so we ensure there's an overarching management plan developed for each of those reserve properties. And that's a piece of work that will be scheduled for coming months. So we will give back feedback to this subcommittee in due course on progress on that.
And lastly, we have Gibson Key with regard to Heritage Hokitika and a meeting to be set with a date to be confirmed. And that will be Louis leading that.
Yep. Thanks. Through the chairman, the Gibson Key, we've recently had council staff have done an actual walk across that area. There's several concerns and maintenance items that requires attention. We have also just in the process of ordering and for installation the new heritage lights for Gibson Key area. So I will arrange a meeting with the heritage group. So we discussed that, and then also Custom House is in for application that's gone with heritage for funding for the Custom House upgrade, also being discussed. Thank you. So
the process here is this agenda item formally captures the actions of the previous meetings, and it's now open for any questions or clarifications regarding the action list to committee members. So we might go anti-clockwise and start with Kate.
Hey.
Just if you have any questions to Fiona or any of the other group managers.
No, I don't have any questions. It looks like everything that we discussed was put down. So.
Good, thank you. Rob.
Just speaking to Lloyd, the next meeting with Heritage Hokitika, we have our normal monthly meeting Tuesday week evening. If you could come along to that, or Simon, that would be much appreciated.
Thank you. Yeah.
I will send you a formal invite to that meeting.
Thank you.
It'll be good to have that update. Thank you.
Just through to you, it'd probably be even better if you have the ability to do a bit of an update of that work program and to present it back to that forum. So
yes, yeah.
Next few days or even Monday, just to get a recalibration so we can make progress, because quite a few things have happened since that last meeting. Just to identify the outstanding actions.
I think it's really positive, and the lottery grant application for the Custom House repairs, we certainly hope we get it, because it does need some serious repairs. If it comes through, that'll be great. So thanks for assistance there.
Just to clarify, further action then is in regards to Simon, you were alluding to something happening early next week, Monday. What was that? Are you suggesting that you meet with Rob?
So for the Tuesday night meeting for the Heritage Group, doing a pre-recce of the actions that were already on their action list.
Yep.
So with it, District Assets and Heritage Hokitika met months ago prior to the Tau Whenua presentation, did a whole lot of work. In that list was quite a comprehensive, this is what needs to happen. Mm-hmm. So just to, I suppose, put a line through the stuff that has happened and get an updated list of outstanding items. So that doesn't need to be tabled here, but it's a piece of work that we'd like to table with Heritage Hokitika.
Are you suggesting a walkover next week, Simon?
Or before your meeting on Tuesday night, if possible.
Yeah, I won't be at that meeting on Tuesday week, but I'll be around early next week, so maybe a walkover with key members of Heritage Hokitika.
So when was the meeting?
It's the 20, whatever it is, 28th or
29th.
29th.
Oh, okay, so we've got another week up our sleeve.
Another week up our sleeve, but I'd quite like to attend a walkover, so if that could be done early next week, that would be great.
Yeah, that's what I was suggesting.
Okay, so I'll coordinate with Louis on that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. We'll capture that in the action list. Thanks, Rob. Any further questions, comments? No? Joe?
Yeah, I guess just a query on process, and conscious that there's a lot of paid and volunteer time sitting in the room, so if we do have an action point, is this just an early slip up in terms of the action points not going out and work going ahead, or is there a process for things coming out of this group being actioned before? And I guess it's around that calls an action around the planting plan query there. So just an inquiry about how we, rather than sitting here and talking about stuff and wasting your time, if there is something that comes out of this group, how does that flow through to staff action?
Thank you, Joe, because that's something that I'm sort of questioning. Like if we make a suggestion, how does the action plan actually come from that? Do we even find out what is happening?
So the idea is the officer gets charged with the action and it goes out as part of the minutes. I'm not sure what stage the planting was when the query was already asked, or whether it was already.
It hadn't started.
But it might have been ordered and already sitting in.
Yeah, but what we kind of hoping was just to see the plan.
Yeah. So Simon obviously is in charge of that. We'll get an update as part of his report, if that's okay.
So, but the issue here is potentially one not necessarily around the plan, it's around asking the process regarding when an action's tabled or noted, what committee member involvement is necessary or officers' time is necessary to actually ensure that the action's achieved. So irrespective of we're sure we'll get an update soon on the planning plan, but the way what I think I'm hearing is what systems are we going to put in place to ensure that actions captured are effectively implemented?
So generally actions end up on the executive team weekly meeting, depending on what scale they are, and we review them as part of our weekly executive team program. So there's a weekly review around most actions. I suppose we have missed the boat in that particular action, so I apologise for that.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, just raising it as a conscious that if it's going to be an action, let's make sure it follows.
Sure, thank you. Paul?
Yeah, no questions, thanks.
No worries. Thank you, Paul. Pat?
No, it was just what Joe, basically she captured it very well.
Thanks, Biddy?
No, nothing. So can I just ask a question? I don't know if this has been covered, but with the racecourse master plan, it said there was a second workshop in September.
That is correct. On the actions, it says there's a second workshop to be planned for September for the Parks, Reserves and Environment Subcommittee.
Which was meant to be today. It's been missed off the agenda, I'm afraid. But it doesn't mean that we can't raise as a later agenda item now if the council, if the committee agrees.
That's useful.
I'm quite comfortable with that. I'm looking outside in terms of our agenda whether the site visit is going to go ahead. But I
didn't bring gumboots.
We can go on Riley's shoulders. No, if we work through the Cass Square, and then we do the verbal and update regarding the beachfront in here, and then we make a decision, we'll need to move it formally onto the agenda and discuss it as an agenda item, or the alternative is we close and workshop the matter. Just in terms of process, I need some advice around that, but I'm pretty sure that's my understanding.
Yeah, we have a workshop outside the meeting.
So we're comfortable with continuing with the agenda as set, and then time allowing discussing the racecourse master plan if we don't attend a site visit to Sunset Point.
How long does the meeting run?
We've got till 5 set aside.
I have to leave then, so hopefully there'll be time for that.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks everyone for that clarity. Thanks for the question. Riley.
Just around Sunset Point, we might come to this later, but just around maintenance down there, is there a maintenance plan for the area when it's complete? What, the gardens and what is the maintenance plan? Is there one?
Yeah, through the chair, I can respond to that. So the maintenance plan will be included in the Parks and Reserves maintenance plan that's currently with West Roads. And what we'll do is we actually will go through and set up a schedule of works and some criteria on how that will be, what's the performance required for the maintenance for that, and then that then gets audited on a quarterly basis on how the contractors perform against those requirements. I can also, at the same time, just alerting them that we are going through a revised maintenance program to be renewed next year, June. So this will form part of that new contract actually being put out, but we'll have an interim contract with West Roads.
Yeah, thanks, Louis. I just think it's important that, the asset is maintained and being such a key area with so many visitors, you'd hate to see it, go to waste and not be attended to. So, thank you.
Okay, noting all of those comments and responses to those, with the questions raised and the updates to the action list, someone happy to move or prepared to move that we receive the action list?
Yep.
Move Biddy, with a second that. Second Sue, all those in favour? Aye. Those against? The resolution's carried, thank you very much. This afternoon we have no formal presentations to the committee. They're normally set as agenda item 6. With there being none, we'll move to agenda item 7, which is our staff reports. And welcome Fiona Scadden, the Planning and Customer Services Manager, and Simon Eyre, the Property and Project Supervisor, to talk us through the Cass Square new concept plan verbal update and visual on page 5 of our agendas. I'd like Simon to come and join us around the table. Thank you. Thanks, Simon.
I'd like to start through the chair just by mentioning that my sort of part in the Cass Square part, this is more Simon's baby, is how it balances with what happens at the racecourse. So we only have room in our town obviously for a certain amount of facilities, and whether we're looking at upgrading facilities at Cass Square or whether we're looking at new facilities at the racecourse, that's as far as my piece goes. Simon is the one driving and looking into the concepts.
Would it be helpful, thank you for that, would it be helpful, Simon, for us to put the concept plan, page 5 of the agenda on, or the discussion document up on the screen?
That's preferable.
Is that possible, please?
Thank you, Becky.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Okay, sorry.
So while Emma does that, we can talk about the concept, and that the presentation of the concept really is a result of a community meeting that was held last year, and we met with the community in order to raise the issues. There was a lot of discussion about different things that needed to happen at Cass Square and were good ideas, and so we thought it preferable to get everybody together and have a conversation about it, and out of that may come a series of action, may come a concept for a bigger picture or a future for the reserve. So we accumulated, basically the picture that's presented is an accumulation of 3 or 4 different ideas that were presented. One being the skate park, which had been presented by members of the community. 2 being additional toilets, which is a perennial conversation around, particularly around the playground. 3, playground equipment and increasing the need for increased and well-maintained facilities. And 4, the pavilion and the concept around extending the pavilion or building a new one and what our options are around those things, and what a new pavilion sports hub may entail. So quite simply, I came back to the office and created a visual of what was discussed so that we can talk about it in the future. We haven't gone beyond that, as we start looking at serious dollars when we're looking at a new pavilion. We have some money in our annual plan for the toilets for Cass Square. And so in that picture, there's two different options of locations. And the skate park is a concept only and needs further development and consultation if the community desires such a thing to be extended and grown.
Just through the chair, can I just interrupt for a second? So all the work we're doing with the racecourse in Cass Square is tying into the recalibration of the long-term plan. So we're about to go into the consultation process for the long-term plan after Christmas. What we're trying to do at the front end is to actually get the strategies confirmed so we can go out for wider consultation as part of the long-term plan process. So what we're doing at the racecourse, and obviously where that future lies, will impact potentially Cass Square as well, or vice versa. So we've got to make sure that we get the best consultation package together so that the public can provide feedback. To lock down the long-term plan by June next year or July next year.
Good. Can we make comments now, or do?
I've said everything I
feedback are
think
you
to say.
seeking, Simon? Are you seeking preferences versus option 1, 2, 3 for pavilion location? Are you seeking more detail than that, higher level? What would you like from the committee?
So in terms of my thinking, this is a snapshot of conversations within that meeting.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to somehow tie it together with what the work that Fiona's consulting on. How does the community? There's a series that's that high level conceptual stuff of what's to happen at the racecourse and at Cass Square, and then once that's decided, we start talking more specifically about what we might do at Cass Square.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, we're a little bit away from having those discussions.
So maybe the discussion could be similar to the discussion that was had at the Planning and Regulatory Services Committee meeting, where we talk about aspirations for the location of activities. So where do we believe that sports, rugby, football, etc. sit in terms of location in the community? Where do we see events sitting within the community? Maybe if we have that discussion, out of that might fall some themes from this table that then can inform both you, Fiona, in your work, and Simon in your work. Does that sound acceptable to the subcommittee in terms of an approach to this? Maybe some people might ask some guiding questions around, I just threw events out there as one that seems to always come up around category, but and have that discussion now.
Could we, that's to do with the playgrounds more though, isn't it? Could we talk about maybe the skate park and the toilet positions, because is that relevant
all
to
of
the
us
other?
will all fit into it, I think, into the discussion. We definitely welcome that. We could go,
Through the chair, I was just going to mention, so that this was also going to pull into the conversation around the racecourse because they do interlink so much. So is it easier to run that together so that we can talk about it as a whole?
Well, we need to know what your plans, your ideas are for the racecourse.
I'm thinking that we've come to the point where that would be useful. To put that up and present that concept now that we've seen that concept, and then look at it from a high level.
Can I just say something?
Yeah, of course.
Is that like you're saying about the difference between Cass Square and Racecourse, right? So as a 61-year-old who's closer probably to a mobility scooter than a Harley Davidson, access for the elderly who like to go and see sport, whether it be kids or rugby or whatever, there's more pensioner flats and housing around this area than there is for them to travel up there on their mobility scooter. Otherwise they'd have to pay for a taxi maybe, so I'm just thinking a little bit.
Your thinking is that feedback, I'm sure, is feedback Fiona wants to hear.
Yeah,
And
well,
also to back that up, Betty, is that I've worked for PACT also, and some of those clients like to walk to Cass Square and watch the rugby games and like to do that. It's probably easier at Cass Square than it would be at the racecourse.
so I guess at the end of the day, it's probably part of their health and wellbeing.
So have we got a way of broadcasting the conceptual plans for the racecourse up onto the screen?
We'll just bring it up.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm wondering if as part of the staff report around Cass Square new concept plan verbal update, we capture the fact that actually to advance this, we need that racecourse master plan discussion incorporated as well, because it's chicken and egg at the moment. And we'll capture that within the resolutions and filming around them. Someone, as chair, I can read all of the agenda, but is someone prepared to move that we add as a late agenda item the racecourse master plan discussion? Moved Riley, seconded Billy. All those in favour? Aye, so we'll bring that forward. Okay. Riley.
Sorry.
I just bring the whole thing up.
So we'll have Fiona will speak to this discussion document.
So this is the very unpolished version. It's got draft stamped all over it. This is a discussion document to try and bring up some ideas around what could happen at the racecourse to gauge community feedback and see what the community feels about placement of different activities. What we could potentially look at is having the likes of events at the racecourse and sports at Cass Square, or vice versa, or both at one location. There's a lot of opinion out there I've heard from different parts of the community about what should happen where, about whether events and sports should be separated due to their, I guess, conflicting use of the ground itself. So this is a vague concept put together just to demonstrate how much space really a good sized multi-sport ground, pavilion, storage space and car park would take up. It was just an indication to demonstrate how large the site actually is and how much could be left over for other purposes as well. Also, yeah, looking at the outdoor play area, the kinds of things that could be useful to clubs and club grounds. We've also got an issue, is not the right term, but we do struggle a little bit on the coast with having small clubs trying to support people. So the idea either here or at Cass Square would be looking around having a multi-purpose sort of club room area that all different clubs could use for different purposes. Having a sport field that's available for rugby and league and potentially soccer, all of, I guess, pooling the resources into one area in the long term. But again, the big question is going to come down to how the community feels about whether that's best placed at racecourse or whether it's best placed at Cass Square. So yeah, then obviously we've got when we're looking at events, we're looking at, well, at this point in time, we're largely looking at Wild Foods Festival. That's our main event right now. At present, it's in an area where it's been well established and considered for quite some time, and there has to be consideration. If it went to the racecourse, what would those impacts be? What would the residents of that area feel about it being there? And we've already established that the use of a sports field for so many people is causing issues for the sport field. So would that be separate to sports being at one of the locations? Or would, in the case of the racecourse, would you allocate one area that's an events area and one area that's a sports area? So there's a lot of questions to go out to the public. We've also, just down this page? Yeah. There's also, at the moment, the property is zoned half residential and half rural. So depending on what happens up there, we'll clarify what sort of zoning we look at in future and whether we look at some form of reserve up there, which it isn't currently. So just by way of a concept, I've taken 2 full street blocks of sort of 1,000 square metre sections to show the kind of area that a development of that size could take up if we looked at keeping some residential. Again, this is all out there for community feedback to find out what the actual preference is. And again, it's looking at the area that's the sunniest, the most sheltered, and the most that makes the most sense to be connecting for infrastructure and roading. Then there's also thoughts around AMP grounds. Where else would they go if they weren't there? So is there room to be fitting them in there? Is that something that the community wants to see continue up there? Is it something that we need to be looking at some purpose-built type pole shed type situation? And then, it moves on to the event grounds. And so these very, very high level at the moment, but the kinds of questions that we would be wanting to ask is give us a ranking of what you think it's most useful as, what you would like to see there preferentially. And then alongside that, I will also be asking for a ranking between would you prefer to see this at Casper or would you prefer to see this at the racecourse? Questions and comments or feedback is most welcome.
How did you say it was going to be funded?
So this is part of the reason for doing it at this stage, is to be planning through the long-term plan. Yeah, so that we can look at that long-term funding. Some of these goals, depending on what the community wants to see there, they could, play out over different periods of time. Some of them might be in a 10-year goal line and some of them might be 6 months to a year. So we would plot that out through the long-term plan process and hope that government wants to hand over more money again in the future.
Can we just backtrack to a question about the pavilion at Cass Square? Does that have to come down?
No.
Is it got to be demolished? Is it earthquake proof?
Was showing signs of age, put it that way. There is some major works we have to do to bring it up to scratch. I would say they're not multi-purpose in terms of the ability for more than a few clubs to use them, but they are showing their real age right now.
And the one at the racecourse, does that one have to come down?
The
pavilion, the grandstand?
Yes.
That has to come down.
So just the buildings on the racecourse, they're pretty well, except for the, what do I call it, the
Toad?
The toad building. There's not a long life left in them, and there's no use that we see for council utilising at the moment. So the most likely preference is they will be removed.
Does that include the boys' brigade?
No, we don't own that. They're on a long lease.
And on that note too, sorry, the RDA has signed a lease for that area, so that's, even though it was highlighted because that came up on the land parcel, that's not included in the future conversation.
Yeah. Where is it on there?
It's called, this is called higher. So
it was on that industrial zone.
So
The
that
red bit
That's the
there.
red
Yeah.
Rob,
The process will take quite some time. Is that correct? And nothing will really happen until the long-term plan is adopted? The one plan? Is this the long-term plan or the one plan?
The long-term plan.
This is the council's long-term plan?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So the one plan would inform, or we would inform the one plan regarding zoning if we wanted to make zoning changes up there. And one of the proposals around that is that under the new planning standards, there is an ability to have a medium density residential zone, which allows for more townhouses and smaller allotments. So that there will be another key question around whether the community sees this to be an ideal place to have that kind of medium density development, or whether we keep that in the existing residential area and look at appropriate places. It's certainly something that's been ear tagged by a lot of different community groups as a need in our area, but where it goes will be the big question.
Yeah, I just wonder if it's all rather complex and there's so many different things happening. But to me, there's a need for a premier sports ground, which is multi-purpose, and a premier, shall we say, pavilion, grandstand, storage area. And then the debate becomes whether that is at Cass Square or at the racecourse. So if you sort of simplify the thinking of it, it makes it easier for the community to have input to it.
So we have looked at options around pavilion. Simon's done a little bit of work without spending a lot of time on it. There's some new grandstands being purpose-built, change into pavilions at Warwick Stadium in Hamilton, as an example.
Yes, yeah.
It's sort of would suit our needs quite nicely. And then looking at a facility to incorporate club rooms and, a bar on top as well.
Yeah.
So purposeful, multi-purpose. So the key is to make sure that it's utilised by all clubs and not having multiple facilities within managed. That is obviously up for discussion as well, but that would be the ideal.
It seems more logical to do it at the racecourse where you've got space to do it rather than try and cram it all into Cass Square, in my opinion. Starting from scratch, building up,
Greenfield site.
Yeah, and rather than trying to really build Cass up, is my sort of view. It seems easier in my head.
There's an artificial hockey turf also been talked about, so catering for multiple sports, it becomes bigger and bigger.
We have been in discussion with Sports Canterbury as well. They're very keen to be part of helping provide a future solution in this space. One thing they've noted, there's no home for West Coast soccer. They're trying to find a home base for them. And obviously we have some strong Hokitika teams. It would be quite nice to actually establish that. But whether they can support with concept design and funding is another option as well. But a multi-purpose hub is what have been developed across multiple little smaller communities through the Canterbury region.
Just through the chair, can I pick your brain on what you just said, Riley? Does that, would you then have a preference for if the sports ground was to be at the racecourse? Would you have a preference for more the events? Would you see that staying?
If people wanted to have events in Cass Square, I don't know. I don't really. That doesn't bother me. It doesn't make a difference really where it is. So, events you can sort of.
Well, at the moment, the events impacts.
Yeah, the sports ground. Yeah, so that's an issue. But if we were just going to use that as an events ground, that would be much more sensible, wouldn't it? And it would mean the maintenance on the ground, you wouldn't need to do as much. The excessive maintenance that goes on there.
No, that's right. The work that has been done in the past is to create a sports field, and we've spent obviously a lot of council money in the past to create that, and it works very, very well. You're right, the standard of that maintenance wouldn't need to be as high.
No.
Are those the only two options? That might be just a silly question, but Cass Square or the racecourse, is that for the multi-sport complex? Is that the only options that places to have them?
They're the only areas at the moment that are one, ready for development, I guess, and two, council owned and large enough and local enough.
Sorry, the other thing is Western High fundraising will still the sports hub to do the field upgrade of the year. What are they looking at doing? Like,
There's an interest register here that no, in all seriousness, I think when we look at conceptual, that's the conceptual long-term thinking here, to me, is 30, 50 years. So where do we want things to be housed? And to me, it is bigger than just outdoor pursuits. It's swimming pools, it's other activities, it's squash, it's tennis, it's it's the discussion that's long term around where a sport and recreation fits within a parks, reserves and environment scope, and that's the discussion that I think we should be looking at. If we don't look at it from how we can all work together and we do half of what needs to be done and leave the other half as they can take care of themselves or they don't want to work with us, then I think we'll end up with a subpar product. So this time now, to me, in my involvement in all of those other groups, is about saying, how do we all get on the same page as sporting groups, community groups, residents, visitors, whatever, and go, this is the aspiration we hold. And like Fiona alluded to, some may be 10, 20 years in their development, but at least the spatial planning's been done that it will allow for that. I'm looking at the close proximity to schools and thinking, you asked the question about schools and thinking, it's going ding, ding, ding in my head about swimming pools and, proximity to other services that could potentially provide heat source for pools. So there's discussion there that needs to be had outside of what we've currently got as issues. Currently we have an issue around events being held on a sports field. And that's the thing. And that's what keeps coming up as a squeaky wheel. But let's not allow that to dominate the conversation. I think the conversation should be around aspiration and strategic thinking and what we want. And the housing discussion rightly fits within this as well in terms of, Fiona was alluding to effectively pensioner housing, the need for further development somewhere by someone for people to be able to stay and retire in our community, because at the moment their options are very limited. So all of that boiling away, we need to distill into what we think best fits on the racecourse at Kesquare or somewhere else. That's probably the other bit to add in, is that if is this best suited racecourse, is this best suited Kesquare, or do you have a suggested alternative location? And that may address some of those other things. No point in us building 3 premier sports fields.
That's what I was alluding to. If Western High are busy upgrading them, and you're going to build something exactly the same up there, so build needs to be looked at.
Around there's been a bit of noise lately around moving the town higher, and where does that fit? Does that conversation come into this at all? Is that a Western District Council long-term thing that potentially plays into any approach here? Is that just one person's noise? Where does that, in terms of a house, if you're talking about housing, and the issue of somewhere the town may or may not need to shift.
And that may be a reason to be looking at maintaining the residential area as it is. The difficulty we have is that we can allow zones for people to use for the purposes that we would like them to use, because we don't have a really big booming kind of development system that trickles. And so then we do end up having a mishmash of kind of activities going on in an area. So if we wanted this to be maintained for residential purposes, that definitely now's the time to be discussing it, so that we can look at keeping that zoning on there. And that way in future, if that's what we're looking at, there is somewhere to go. In terms of commercial buildings or moving of the commercial area, that's a whole different conversation. That is an extremely difficult thing for a little wee council to achieve. But certainly zoning for area to retreat to is something that we can look really seriously at. And like I say, if that's by holding on to a residential area so that it's there, then that's what we can look at doing definitely. And that's part of this conversation, is getting that feedback.
Where does that conversation start in terms of, is that on any 50-year plan? Does it sit with regional council? Does it sit with district council? Is that conversation?
The conversation is around the zoning really, and this is going through with the one plan which is the combined district plan that we're working through at the moment. So we're being quite mindful when we're looking at zoning and extension of zones of where the most appropriate sort of high and dry places would be for that. Obviously, we've got a lot of quite low level coastal land in Westland, and so we are looking at potential alternatives where we can zone and create areas that are then available for development in the future and for people to be moving to. Yeah. So that is, at this stage, that is the plan. The regional council obviously have their own hazard management strategies as well, and through their regional plans, they make it, they set the scene, and that there is generally a 10-year plan, but it gets reviewed quite regularly.
But in terms of factors and things affecting our thinking, it certainly needs to be there. It's lifting our eyes a bit and looking at the horizon rather than looking at what's needed right now, I think, because I look back at some potentially missed opportunities by the council of days gone by, where I think we're kicking ourselves for missing those opportunities, and this is potentially the chance to look at that 30, 50-year vision for sport and recreation, housing, cohesion within our community. So now that we've had the racecourse themes presented, I guess, or draft conceptual plan ideas, is there any comment at this stage from anyone in terms of their feedback?
As far as RDA goes. So the concept that you put up there with it being on that side of the racecourse, was that definite, or could it not move closer to the residential area, leaving
So
some of it?
RDA.
So I'm thinking about grazing and RDA permits of that as well. And when you showed where you were going to put maybe the multi-sport facility, it was over this side of the racecourse. So could it move closer to the potential residential zone, leaving some of it available for grazing?
Emma, can I get you just to scroll? There's a plan that's got residential zone and rural zone shown on it. So the reason it was plonked there was literally to show the size of the area that it would take up. So it's definitely not a set. But you can see here, so the yellow side is the rural zone and the other side is the residential zone. So it's pretty much half of the property is in residential there. So yeah, I mean, obviously one of the options is looking at just retaining that as residential as it is.
Yeah.
And do anything else on that rural zone side. And then when we look at the rural zone side, whether we want to make that potentially a sports reserve, or it's kind of chicken and egg. It depends what the activities are likely to be to go there to determine then what that zone best looks like. But that is up for option as well. So if the community comes back and very strongly says, absolutely no, we don't want residential up there, we only want, I don't know, swimming pools and whatever it might be, then the whole piece might end up getting rezoned to whatever that favoured response is. So again, with the residential zone at present, that allows for section sizes of down to 300 square metres, which is, that sounds small until you want to apply some townhouses or joint units, and then suddenly you've got breaches of the plan everywhere. So that's where, if we were looking at wanting to accommodate like some pensioner housing or just small townhouses, then we would be looking at whether we need to rezone a medium density zone in there.
It's a little bit unclear on the process. Does the council go out with a proposal, say pension housing, swimming pool, premier sports ground, and put that to the public and see what the response there is? Or does the council go out with several different options and invite comments on a number of options?
So the options that are on here will be added to, because there's a couple of things that need polished up, and then that will go out to the public to get the initial feedback, so that we get a much clearer idea of what the feeling is for what the area should be used for. And then based on that, we'll get some concepts put together that make it much clearer what we're looking at, where we would be going, how we would achieve it. and then that would go out for consultation as part of the long-term plan consultation.
As a draft, long-term plan, I guess.
So I guess there's quite, this is the starting level. We're not ready to put a concept together yet because we don't know what the community want, and because we're in such a different kind of space with this, it's land that's not been talked about before, it wasn't an option until just recently, so, whereas we've got a pretty good idea of what people want to see at Cass Square or in the town centre, we've had a lot of conversation previously, but we're just starting a conversation with this one.
To flip that, is there anything that we think is missed in terms of things we would like to see as part of the discussion? Anything else that, in terms of the staff developing this discussion document, we believe should be a factor, something to be considered? We've heard about events, we've heard about sports grounds, we've heard about residential housing or residential mixed housing, we've heard about recreational facilities, we've heard about AMP, we've heard about festivals of the like, we've heard about grazing, we've heard about RDA, existing use rights with the Boys Brigade. Are we missing something? Is something glaringly, obviously missing that needs to be part of this discussion?
Can I just ask, you mentioned something about a convention centre?
Yeah, so I guess part of that idea was around if there was a sports pavilion,
Yeah.
that if there's a good sized club room that goes with that, that could potentially also be rented out for the likes of events. And I guess the conversation there would again be, do we want to go sort of full-size convention centre in the hope that we actually attract people to come here because we've got no large spaces, or is it secondary to just having a good sized club rooms that we can rent out?
So all I was thinking of was like the impact on local businesses that do catering and stuff, which are used at conventions. So would they be invited to be part of it, or would they be excluded, like business-wise?
Right. Yeah, I mean, this is very conceptual at this stage, and I think if there was something like sort of convention centre, it would be a very small scale, probably not what you've seen in the city.
Yeah.
And more likely to be a space that's available, and then everybody, people organise their
Yeah.
own
Yeah.
catering,
Yeah.
etc.
No, that's right.
Yeah, I just don't think that we're big enough. This is, I mean, again,
No,
this is
we're
all
not,
conceptual,
to
but
take away business, yeah.
I did just wonder if there's a historical value of the racecourse and it's sort of keeping some of that, shape, some of the racecourse intact as a
so
some
obviously
history of it being used for that, and keeping some of that within
glory.
it. Pardon?
Racecourse Lane.
Yeah, something along those lines.
So we have, the only thing we've promised that will retain is the totaliser building in some capacity.
So, but not actually on site, maybe? Or?
Potentially, and potentially if there's no use for it in the future's layout of scheme, it can still come down. So it really comes down to, we haven't tied ourselves into a position where we have to retain anything on the racecourse.
I personally, from a planning perspective, would like to see it tied in as a
Some
theme
capacity.
point somewhere along the way.
It does require a lot of money to bring it up to the right standard though, so that it's got to be taken into account.
I'd like to just mention something from my point of view, community garden or some sort of planting up there. I think would be good to add into the concept.
Just like when that goes out to consultation, even just hearing other people talk, to throw all of the ideas out there to trigger people to think, even thinking about squash and, I think everyone comes at it with quite a narrow view of what sports is or what events are, and if you can actually put as much on paper to get people thinking more broadly when they submit and when you possibly get less conflicting stuff and more cohesive kind of, that's right, I've got to take this into consideration. If you can gather as much of that, I'm sure you've done most of that, but gathering as broader spectrum of what's currently out there and what we could provide to prompt people's strategic thinking, that's valuable.
And I think that's where the zoning comes in. So if we identify that this is a really good area to have recreation, then we open it up so that in future, if somebody wants to build a new squash club rooms, if somebody, if these things are coming up, then this is the ideal place for it because it's already been tagged as that zone and that spot.
Paul, have you unmuted your microphone? To talk
Yep.
to us.
Yeah, I'm unmuted.
Great.
Did you want my view?
Absolutely.
Okay. I love the idea of it, the racecourse becoming an events arena. I speaking about the tote and retaining that, I think it's important that that has to be retained on that site for its historic value. Someone said about the historic value of the racecourse, and I agree. The tote is, of course, the connector there. There's been some talk loosely about possibly in the future moving it, uplifting it, moving it somewhere else. I don't think that's a good idea at all. I think it needs to remain in situ for its historic value. And that area around the tote and where the grandstand is, and heading around towards Park Street, and the the residential zone is the ideal place for housing. Coming off Dalton Street, I think. But I'd leave it around there. I think the majority of that site lends itself so well to an events arena. As for Cass Square, I'm also of the mind of Latham that we need to look 50 years hence, and that, to my mind, is do we really need two playing fields on Cass Square? I don't think so. Myself, I think that the one premium playing field, and I'm suggesting that Cass Square, in my view, its future is as the premium sports field, not for events. That you retain field one, and the field two could be in the long term something like what they have in Westport, where they develop the aquatic centre combined with a hockey turf, combined with the new squash courts, and they did it relatively cheaply for a small town. I don't know how many have been there, but I've been there to the swimming pool many times, and it's a great facility that is achievable in a small town. And I could envisage that in somewhere that's accessible, and that would be on what's now field Cass Square Field 2. Could be that a future hockey turf, aquatic centre, etc. As for the pavilion, the current pavilion, my thought is that I wouldn't like to see it bold. I think that at least part of it anyway might,
Paul, I think we've lost you. Okay, so we'll carry on with the discussion, and if Paul rejoins us, do you want to just hide the screen? And we'll carry on. Any other comments on the Cass Square racecourse concept plans?
I'm for the Cass Square having playing fields, definitely, or a playing field. This idea's not a good idea.
Just through the chair, just talking about the playground equipment for a second. There was obviously quite a movement at the last year's annual plan to actually upgrade. The equipment is quite tired, and it's had to go through a lot of safety upgrades as part of the recent audit. So in terms of upgrading that, it will have to be shown in a long-term plan as well, with some substantial funding. Just thoughts about that. Obviously, we're not represented by that group here today, but they were very keen to upgrade it to a very similar one to Greymouth, Dixon Park.
I thought that was for the Dixon House residents to come across to. No, so the comments are now around so some of the things we maybe missed in discussion, playground equipment, skate park, those sort of the other or family or potentially youth focused activities. Anyone to the contrary of the Chief Executive's view that the upgrade of the playground at Keswick needs to proceed and needs to be funded as part of the LTP?
Agree with that, but the provision of toilets at the playground needs to be part of that upgrading. And the location of the toilets, I think the ideal corner would be between the skate park and the playground, rather than to the west of the
Which is option two in the drawing.
So I hate to bring up the elephant in the room. Well, is the Robert Burns statue that sits awkwardly there, potentially if you put a set of toilets next to it, in terms of historic location of monuments and things and potential future development of space, that is something that will need to be addressed somehow as well, because if you look where it sits right in the, right next to proposed block of toilets, which I don't think was necessarily the intent of when that statue was unveiled. And so there's another thing, another factor.
So those are just options at this stage. It's not, they can always be revised. Option three could be where the swing set is on the other side of the roadside.
But the question about that statue is, can it be elevated and highlighted, installed, and retains the same amount of cultural significance by being moved 5 metres or whatever needs to be done to. This is what it will come down to. People will either be very for or very against the movement of a historic monument. So, but it sits right in it's actually a key issue because it sits right in the potential development of the skate park where you've got people skating. It just doesn't feel right anymore. It feels like we've put two monuments on Keswick at a time when it was a much different, it was used for different purposes than we're proposing to use it for. So factoring that in somehow, a relocation of it or a elevation or a protection of it or something needs to be in the discussion.
Paul's back.
See Paul, I've raised Paul's tail feathers. Hi Paul, you're back, welcome back.
I'm going to speak on behalf of people of most interest. But I do think that it may be a conversation that needs to be had. But moving statues, I think, is not going to be a very productive conversation, to be honest. The Historic Places Trust, also not just Heritage New Zealand now, would need to have strong persuasion about moving monuments. The monuments have been there, of course, a lot longer than the skate park ever was there. I think the monuments ought to stay where they are. This is my view, and other things move around them unless it's on the actual site of the toilets or whatever, as you say. But to move it out of its current environment, I think, is not conducive to a happy community. It missed all my spiel before about the race course, but I won't go over it again.
No, we heard, I think
lost the internet. Sorry.
No, we lost just the end of your kōrero, we got most of it.
Finish off with the pavilion, you were talking about the pavilion?
The current one at Cass Square.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, all I was saying there was that I don't think that it should be demolished too hastily. At least part of it should be offered to the Kiwi Rugby Club. That's all I'm suggesting.
We'll capture that. Thanks, Paul. Maybe I just presented a down the middle discussion around the statue, the Robert Burns statue, because I think it will become an issue. And I think at the moment that plan doesn't effectively recognise that issue. That's what I'm suggesting. I'm not saying, bulldoze everything around it or move it. I'm just saying don't underestimate how much potential that has to cause angst in the community. Let's get it right in any consultation document by recognising that it sits there at the moment and probably needs to be enhanced. So
I think we all know that there were lessons to be learned from the moving of the Pioneer Monument. I don't want to go down that road, but there were lessons from it, and
that's right. Yeah.
At the forefront.
Biddy.
With the toilets, option 2, number 2s, there's already a toilet proposal, the pink one, closer to the roadway or the footpath. So why couldn't that option 2 be moved further back towards the footpath in that corner? So you're taking the toilet away from the statue.
That's what sign.
And there are toilets in the pavilion. So do we need more toilets?
I think what was raised through the previous annual plan submissions was that when you've got small children on the playground, it's a really long way to take them if they need to go to the toilet and hurry. And so that was one of the reasons, alongside the fact that those toilets were in need of an upgrade, so trying to balance which the best option was.
We do seem to have a fair few toilets for a small town, right?
Doesn't really matter if you're 2 years old.
No, gotta go.
Put your nappy on. Yeah, okay, we've captured that. The only other thing that's just coming to my mind is around timing of consultation and the potential for this significant discussion to get lost in an LTP process. And I don't know thoughts around that from staff in terms of.
Well, bear in mind there's a number of workshops with councillors through that process to finalise the LTP program.
I'm sorry, I'm meaning in terms of when we go to the community, if we're going to the community with this as part of an LTP consultation, this is one aspect of an LTP consultation, if that makes sense. Whereas we're going to be talking to the community about everything within the LTP we want feedback on, and we may highlight this as something we would, like the feedback on, but when that is put next to this is what your, what's needed for the stormwater infrastructure in the community, and this is what past community are looking at, all of those things come in, it can be overwhelming, and I'm just really concerned about our timeline between now, October, getting into the development of the plan 1st of July. So is it proposed to go as part of the LTP consultation?
There's another step in between then now and the LTP consultation. There's another special consultation with the public in terms of concepts, what the public wants. We need that to actually quantify the LTP document.
Cool. That's really important, I think, for everyone to understand. Sorry, Leslie had your hand up to you.
Yeah, I was just going to say that there's no reason we can't consult separately on it, but I don't think we can bring the whole thing together unless it goes out with a long-term plan consultation, because we can't look at the whole picture as far as rates impacts are concerned on its own. Has to go as part of the whole thing. And some things we can't go forward with unless it's actually provided for in an LTP.
So, as I understand it, the timeline would be preliminary consultation with the community this side of Christmas?
Yes.
And then whatever the findings of that we will consider as a subcommittee as part of the feedback process, and then the preferred options will then be used to inform the consultation document with the community for the long-term plan. So a process that gives focus to this before Christmas, where we, as committee members, we need to be talking to our communities around ensuring that their voice is heard in this process and that they have their say. Because then that will then turn into more detailed design and costings that will inform the LTP. People clear on that as a pathway forward? Yep. Because we have a role to just train many millions rolling out of town to pass. We have a role as committee members to advocate for kind of community input into this process. So much of it is possible to be.
How far does the community range in this? Does it go right through southwestern, like you're talking about sports clubs, all the sports clubs, which would involve all the visiting district ones too, would it, or not?
Yeah, definitely. So the conversations for all of Westland.
Yeah.
I mean, these would be key facilities for all of Westland.
Yeah.
So, but he's asking who are the people of most interest?
Yeah. Well, you know, you've got your Southwestern Rugby Club. If you're talking netball, but we probably won't because we're half an hour. So yeah, how far does it stretch?
So last year when we had a conversation around CAS, where we identified a lot of those key stakeholders during that process and invited them in as a workshop.
Yeah.
I think it'll be a starting point, that group, plus obviously a wider conversation with other targeted organisations.
Yeah, or like, you know, preschool families with, you know, preschools in the area as well, you know, because a lot of them do, if they come to town, they do take their kids, I guess, here to play, so.
Sorry, just to clarify, so there has already been a lot of input from all of those groups. So where we're at now is that this document will go out for public notification, so all of the public will have, this will be advertised and they will have an ability to comment on that. So we won't be running in more and more series of conversations and independent meetings with these individual groups. And we've taken on board, especially with the Casper situation, we've taken on board with what's been said and what they've indicated. And now it's to take it out, to get a really clear feedback, and that's, like I say, for all of Westland. So it doesn't matter if you're down in Hurst or whether you're.
I think just the other useful information to have in that community consultation area is what's currently here, and so the high school, the Western Hub would be a great example, like which codes are really well catered for how long with the swimming pool upgrade. Okay, that's got a 10-year vision or a 50-year vision. You know, consider the swimming pool after 10 years or 50 years, or so what's well catered for, and we don't need to reconsider in those areas.
Just for the Chair, the Sports Canterbury have almost finished a complete review of West Coast sports in terms of facilities and everything. So we'll be part of that. So they're about to finalise that in the very near future. So that's a good starting document.
Yeah.
Looks at every type of sport, every code as well.
There was a little bit of talk around a bit of a cycle trail vision, and is that I believe there's been a cycle trail sort of vision presented to council at some level.
So we have a subcommittee for the West Coast Wilderness Trail.
Yeah.
It's purely for that entity. There has been discussions around what does cycling and walking mean for the town. We haven't progressed that any further than that at this stage. There is obviously some close links, and there's a lot of other interested parties that don't use the cycle trail, but have this mountain club, obviously, groups as well. They're quite keen to explore further trails within, I suppose, the Western Regional Hokitika in particular.
Can we seek an update on that for the next agenda, the next meeting? I'm sure it's ringing the bell in my head that there's been some sort of group of the mountain bike club, I think, or something, started pulling together a document that connects up existing trails and starts to make, yeah, I haven't, but I've just, something's there.
I suggested they present it to the.
Yeah, they present it to us, so come and actually hear from them, yeah, that would be good.
And possibly even just widen it, so at the moment we've got a skate park concept in it, and I think the bike thing is becoming more and more, and they're actually starting to overlap more and more, and whether we just go a little bit broader with our concepts and terminology, you know, a bike skate park, just to get people thinking, going a little broader, or a wheels facility, or, you know, you don't see kids on skateboards anymore, they're on scooters now, or, you know, whatever that entails.
Well, then good to include the heritage walking trails as well in the report. Next meeting. Is that something we need to keep an eye on?
That had $5,000 granted in the annual plan this year, and I understand that maintenance is progressing, so hopefully.
Very real asset to this community.
Nice new signs.
Yeah, nice sign.
Nice signs.
Yeah.
So the actions there, so just as we bring this discussion to a close around, so two small things that fell out for the next meeting is a request for the mountain biking club to come and present their vision around connected trails, and also we can seek an update on the heritage walkway around Chicken in terms of who would be best placed to provide that. Is that an operational internal report, or is that external, Heritage Taka, or is it?
What we will do is we'll get maybe Jackie Burdon to present the cycle trail plus other heritage aspects in terms of signage, etc. as part of that project.
Yeah, okay, that's good. And in terms of our actions to close off the K Square and the racecourse concept plans, are there any that we need to note? Other than the fact that the staff will be pulling together this conceptual plan, getting a discussion document out to the community before Christmas. Right.
How does it go out? In the paper or on the council website?
Generally a newspaper advertisement as well as on the website.
Someone happy to move that we receive the report, combined reports? Move Pip, seconded Rob, all those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Resolution's carried, thank you very much. Kia ora, Paul, thanks for your attendance.
Yep, thank you. Sorry, I've got to go. Thank you.
Thank you. We're now moving through to the beachfront development and Sunset Point verbal update from Simon here. Simon.
Well, obviously, we've had a fair amount of work completed in the last 2 months, which is particularly exciting, given that the project's taken a long time to plan and implement. We last Friday finished the chip sealing, which was a momentous occasion for myself, just because getting it to this point means we're getting close to finishing. I mean, there's still a number of items yet to be completed with the point, namely installation of the toilets, the line marking and signage for all the safety stuff for the roading. So we've just had discussions internally around speed bumps or temporary speed management systems, because we can see that we always knew that it was going to be an issue, so we just finalised what we're going to do there. So there will be some traffic calming speed bumps and notifications, and particularly around the reverse car parking. That's a new thing for Westland, and we haven't installed one of these until now, so there'll be an education process and some signage required to alert people about how to park in this area. Things like rubbish bins and picnic tables are yet to be installed, and lighting around the tambo and the toilets themselves, and then finishing details if there's some money left over within the budget. we may be able to put some more artistic expression into the whole environment. We've managed to reinstate the Donald Buglis created concrete chair with consultation with the fairmaids, so that was nice to be able to put that back and put it into a place that highlights it as it was intended. There is managed to find a set of 3 steel cutout sculptures that we had sitting in a workshop from a previous project, which Ken Rees had drawn. We had them profile cut out, so I've had them manufactured into a tripod of people. So that's another artwork that will be installed down there as well. So when we're getting to thinking about artwork phase, we know we're getting close to the completion of the project, but with the increasing of the soil and the fill material down at the point, we've increased the amount of grass that will be required. That's not a problem, but we will have to factor it into the maintenance plan that we've been working on. And the way I've installed a number of the edgings and things around, we're trying to minimise additional maintenance for the staff. So wider turnings so that they can actually get in there and mow it. And issues with the point as it was a bit more of a wild natural environment previously is that there's a lot of overgrowth and scrub and things that are just hard to continue to maintain to edges. So now we've got a lot of edges that are far easier to maintain. We can pretty much just measure and schedule according to the cutting rates of the grass. We've tried to install mounds so that we know our mowers will be able to just drive straight over it and keep it simple. So really only promised doing the foundation works for the whole thing. So things like tree planting and stuff like that can come down the line. At the moment, if we put a foundation in, get our car parking, get our walkways in, toilets, a lot of grass and some seating and some rubbish bins, then we've got the base and we can add other bits in later. So to address the planting, I think it may have been six plant types we put in there. 2 lots of carex. Given that it's an extremely difficult environment to grow plants, keep it very, very simple, very, very coastal. With 2 lots of carex that just design little grasses that are designed to just soften all the hard edges at the moment. I've got 2 big roundabouts that once the grasses grow, it should just wave in the wind. And then there's a few, maybe 6 or 7 small heavies just to break the edge of the rock, and some mini toys, which we know pretty much you can cut off at ground level and they'll grow back. So everything that we've planted can be beaten up, take a hiding, and stay around, because we've tried to plant plants down there in the past, and things like cabbage trees don't even last. So let's keep it low, let's keep it very hardy, and hopefully we won't have too much to replace. But that was the thinking, learning from lessons that we've learned in the past.
Thank you for the report, Simon. Opening day?
That's a great question. Once the toilets are in and working and the grass is planted, I really wouldn't. We need to wait a little bit of time for the grass, the soil temperature to come up before we can hydro seed. So the intention is to hydro seed it, bring the machines in and spray the grass down. That we know from works that we did on the beachfront that establishes really quickly and well. So there's a fair amount of work to do before we get to that point.
So you're talking end of spring, summer, end of summer?
Maybe the start of summer. It'd be nice to have it all officially open by then.
1st of December.
Again, dependent on soil temperatures when we can get that other stuff finished. But we're up to the finishing work now, so we need to keep the push on to make sure we
Just
get
to
it
clarify
correctly.
though, the space is still usable between now and that time. It's not as though it's not going to be functioning, just not an official opening time.
The roadway is open now.
That's right.
So people can still get out of the bypass. It's very important to have parking down there for everybody. So the access is there, but let's work on finishing it off. And once the grass is green, we can have some pretty photos with everybody down there. Some seats installed and some rubbish bins.
I'm not interested in pretty photos. I'm interested in just knowing in terms of the project when we'd say that we've actually completed the project in terms of milestones. And it sounds like based on the need for it to proceed and stuff, it'll be around the start of summer. So that's.
But in terms of that project finished, all the invoices, etc. will be closed. So you don't, not waiting for us to go to actually finalise it. So project finish is pretty well the end of October, isn't it?
Yeah. Great to have it finished.
Has anyone got any questions for Simon?
Is the anchor coming back from the Tambo? Was it taken away?
I understand lines. I think discussed.
So there's a space for it to go.
There's space to be able to put it. Nearly installed a large rock that we could put it onto the face of, but figured that it was a freestanding one would be better. But happy to have those discussions to implement.
No, I was just making sure it was happening. I'm not in the loop with lines and what's going on. Well, I am, but
there is discussions about bringing, and there's a memorial seat to be brought back as well that was installed by Lions originally. So we've had those discussions, and there's spacing for. I have purchased 5 sets of Merkakapa picnic tables. So the intent is to have grassed areas with picnic tables.
and that area off the end that drops down, that's growing gorse. What is it? Nothing happening down there. Yeah.
Well, when the design was done, we didn't, or completed, we didn't know what was going to happen there in terms of how much damage it could sustain, what we did. So when we applied for the funding, we had only factored in putting a car park in, increasing the size of the rock wall, etc., around the area, so that we could create a project. My intent would be that we'd be able to bring down a lot more rock, and lift that area up so that it's actually higher than the current roundabout right at the end. It'd be nice if it was half a metre higher, and then ultimately have some form of lookout tower or something, or a classy tower that signifies the importance of the view in the area and as a point of interest. So if we can achieve that down the line, it'll be great. Any other questions?
Someone will remove the gorse? Or is that up to Lions? Everything gets action to Lions. No.
No, that was only in the Tambo discussion.
Yeah, it would be good to get that gorse removed once that takes off.
I'll have a look at it.
Thanks, Simon. I really do appreciate the report, as does the subcommittee, and we are looking forward to being part of going forward with that and any enhancement and beautification work that we can collectively muster as a council in the future.
That's looking great.
Okay. Someone prepared to move that we receive the verbal update regarding the beachfront development at Sunset Point.
Yep.
Is that sorry? Biddy? Seconded Joe. All those in favour? Those against? The resolution's carried. Thank you very much. And those minutes will be circulated within 10 working days. So they'll be available now. We'll just make sure we get the wording right around bringing in that late agenda item with the movers and seconders and stuff. Thank you to those people that have filled in the interest register. For those of you who haven't done it before or are new to this, there's actually an area where you put the name of the interest that you have, and then an area where you can specify whether it's a financial interest, so whether you gain funds personally as a result of being on that. I'm not going to advise you on that, just know that there's actually some other columns to fill in as well, and it may seem pedantic, but that's a requirement and it's a local government requirement. So if you have put an interest on here, thank you so much. Can you just check that you've specified whether it's what type of interest it is and whether it's an actual perceived or an actual potential conflict? Thanks. Thank you. Okay, if there is nothing further, we'll declare the meeting closed. And we'll thank you so much to the public for tuning in. We will stop the live stream now.